inappropriate relationships or behaviors. The purpose of this story is solely for entertainment. Lauren had been looking forward to this weekend for months. Her husband, Dylan, was off on a 2-day business trip to Chicago, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she had the house all to herself. No shared Netflix fights, no reheated leftovers, no awkward silences over dinner. Just her wine, and her freedom. She had already stacked 3 rom-coms in her watch list and prepped a bubble bath with lavender oil. The silence that filled the house wasn't lonely. It was peaceful, even healing. It was a drizzly Friday afternoon when the call came. Her cousin, Angela, sounded frantic. There had been a flight mix-up, and her 19-year-old son, Aiden, was stuck in Lawrence City for the night. The original plan was for Aiden to fly directly from his college town in Oregon to visit his mother in New York, but bad weather had caused a diversion. "Can he crash with you tonight?" Angela asked. "Please? It's just one night. He'll be gone first thing in the morning." Lauren hesitated. She barely remembered Aiden. The last time she saw him, he was maybe 12. But saying no didn't feel right. She had the space, and it wasn't like she was doing anything urgent. "Sure," she said, against her better judgment. "Send me his info. I'll text him my address." The rain had intensified by evening, and the wind began tapping at the windows like impatient fingers. At exactly 10:04 p.m., the doorbell rang. Lauren opened it to find a tall, lean young man standing awkwardly, his hoodie soaked through and a duffel bag clutched in his hand. "Hi, I'm Aiden," he said with a half-smile. Lauren gave a polite smile back and stepped aside. "Come in. You're drenched." She offered him a towel, a hot drink, and showed him to the guest room. Aiden was quiet but polite, thanking her with every small gesture. She noticed that he had grown into a striking young man, messy dark hair, tired but kind eyes, and a posture that screamed humility. He wasn't the little boy from the family photos anymore. Something about his presence unsettled her, but she chalked it up to the strangeness of hosting someone she barely knew. They ate a late dinner together, grilled cheese and tomato soup. Nothing fancy, but comforting. Their conversation was light, mostly about college, travel chaos, and weather. Still, there was something unspoken between them, something Lauren couldn't name yet. By midnight, they had said goodnight. Lauren lay in bed, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun slowly. She didn't understand why her heart felt restless. It was just a temporary visit, she reminded herself. Just one night. The knock at the door wasn't loud, but it was enough to echo through the quiet halls of Lauren's home. It was already past 10 p.m. when she opened the door and saw Aiden standing under the porch light, soaked from head to toe, his hood clinging to his hair, water dripping from the edges of his backpack. He looked like he had walked through the storm itself. A polite but tired smile crossed his face. "Sorry I'm late. The Uber took forever," he mumbled. Lauren stepped aside immediately. "Come in, you're drenched," she said, already grabbing a towel from the hallway closet. He walked in slowly, trying not to drip too much water on the wooden floor. She handed him the towel, and as he dried his face and hair, she got a better look at him. He was tall, taller than she expected, and carried himself with a sort of quiet discomfort, like he was trying to make himself smaller in a world that didn't quite fit him. His features were sharp, yet soft, with kind eyes that darted around nervously. "You hungry?" she asked, trying to break the ice. He gave a shy nod. "A little. I didn't eat much today." Lauren warmed up leftover soup and made a grilled cheese sandwich while Aiden sat quietly at the dining table, glancing around the house. It had been years since they'd seen each other, and Lauren couldn't shake off the strangeness of how time had turned the awkward preteen she once remembered into this young man who now sat at her table. She realized she barely knew anything about him, just scattered updates through family gossip or holiday texts. As they ate, the conversation started to loosen. He talked about college life in Oregon, how classes felt too robotic, how he didn't really feel like he belonged anywhere. Lauren found herself genuinely listening, nodding, laughing softly when he made a dry, sarcastic remark about dorm food. There was a certain maturity in the way he spoke, not arrogant but aware. "You know," Aiden said between bites, I was kind of nervous about staying here. Didn't think I'd remember anything about you. Lauren smiled. Well, you were a little shy kid the last time I saw you. I guess we're both different now. Something about the way she said it, soft, maybe unintentionally warm, made the silence that followed feel more intimate than it should have. Aiden looked up briefly, then quickly looked away, as if realizing he had stared too long. Lauren cleared her throat and stood to put the dishes in the sink. She showed him the guest room, handed him a fresh t-shirt and some sweatpants from her husband's side of the closet, and reminded him where the bathroom was. "Make yourself at home," she said before closing her own bedroom door behind her. As Lauren slid into bed, she stared at her phone, not really reading anything on the screen. Her thoughts felt tangled. Aiden was family, sort of, but not really. He was just a guest. Still, she couldn't explain why something about his presence left her feeling unsettled. The house was still. Rain tapped gently against the windows, and the clock on Lauren's nightstand glowed 12:17 a.m. No matter how many times she shifted positions or fluffed her pillow, sleep wouldn't come. Her mind kept circling the same questions. Why did Aiden's presence feel so distracting? Why did that casual dinner feel unusually intimate? Why did she catch herself thinking about the way his eyes lingered a second too long? She sighed, slipping out of bed and wrapping herself in her robe. Maybe a cup of chamomile tea would help. As she padded softly down the hallway and into the kitchen, she stopped short. Aiden was already there, standing by the fridge, barefoot, holding a glass of water. He looked startled when he turned and saw her. "Sorry," he whispered. "Didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't," she said gently, walking over to the counter. "Couldn't sleep either?" He shook his head and gave a tired smile. "Not used to quiet houses." Lauren chuckled softly. "I know the feeling." She filled the kettle and stood beside him, the silence not uncomfortable this time, but shared. A few minutes later, they sat across from each other at the kitchen table, each holding a warm mug of tea. At first, the conversation was light. He asked about her job as a freelance editor, and she asked more about his college classes. But slowly, the surface-level talk dissolved, and something deeper began to take shape. "I don't really talk to my mom about stuff," Aiden admitted after a moment. "She's too busy trying to fix me." Lauren raised an eyebrow. "Fix you?" "Yeah. She thinks if I just try harder, be more confident, get better grades, be more social, then I won't be so lost." Lauren nodded slowly. "And do you feel lost?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stared into his cup, then finally whispered, "All the time." She felt a pang in her chest. He reminded her of a younger version of herself. Misunderstood, drifting through life, hoping someone would just sit down and listen without trying to fix her. Maybe that's why she didn't ask any follow-up questions. She just let the silence sit with them. "What about you?" he asked suddenly. "You seem, I don't know, like you've got everything figured out." Lauren let out a quiet laugh. "That's a lie I've gotten good at telling. Honestly, some days I feel invisible, like I'm just filling a space in someone else's life." Their eyes met. For a moment, neither of them spoke. There was no mistaking the weight of that shared vulnerability. Eventually, she stood up and gestured to the hallway. "We should probably try to get some sleep." He nodded, standing too. But as they walked side by side in the dim hallway, their hands brushed, just barely. Neither of them pulled away. At her door, she paused. "Good night, Aiden." "Good night, Lauren." But long after the doors closed, neither of them slept. The morning light spilled gently through the kitchen window as Lauren poured coffee into 2 mugs. She wore a simple robe over a tank top and pajama pants, her hair slightly tousled. She hadn't slept much, only drifted in and out of a restless haze filled with strange dreams and quiet questions. The conversation from last night echoed in her mind like a tune that wouldn't leave her. Aiden entered the kitchen barefoot, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, his damp hair a little messier than before. He wore the t-shirt and sweatpants Lauren had lent him, her husband's, which hung just slightly loose on his lean frame. He looked young but not like a child, comfortable, relaxed, present. "Morning," he said with a yawn and a shy smile. Morning, Lauren replied, sliding a mug toward him. Hope the bed was okay. He nodded, taking a sip of the hot coffee. Best sleep I've had all week, actually. There was a lightness in the kitchen, but it floated above something unspoken. A silent tension simmered beneath the mundane conversation about the weather and travel updates. Their eyes would meet, and one of them would look away a second too late. Their voices remained casual, but the pauses between sentences were charged. At one point, Lauren leaned over to grab the butter, and Aiden instinctively reached to help. Their hands touched briefly, but enough for her to feel it. She looked up, startled by the way his eyes lingered, not boldly, but curiously, like he was reading something on her face that he wasn't supposed to see. For a split second, everything froze. In that moment, she wasn't someone's wife, and he wasn't someone's son. They were two people in a quiet kitchen, staring into a truth neither dared to name. It wasn't lust exactly, not yet, but it was intimacy. Dangerous intimacy. Lauren was the first to pull away, clearing her throat as she busied herself with the toast. Her heart raced, her mind scrambling for stability. This isn't happening, she told herself. He's just being polite. He's a kid. You're imagining things. But she wasn't imagining the warmth in her chest or the way her skin had prickled when their hands touched. She wasn't imagining how aware she suddenly was of her body, of his presence, of the electricity hanging in the air. She tried to keep the rest of the morning simple. She gave him a fresh towel, reminded him where the shampoo was, and told him she'd drive him to the airport around noon. They barely spoke after that, but every silence said more than words could. As Aiden showered, Lauren stood by the kitchen sink, staring out the window, her coffee growing cold in her hand. It was just a glance, she whispered to herself. Just a brush of the hand. Just a moment too long. But deep down, she knew it wasn't just that. Something had shifted, and whatever it was, it couldn't be undone. The drive to the airport was unusually quiet. Lauren kept her hands firmly on the wheel, her eyes fixed on the road, as if watching the passing cars would help her ignore the storm that had begun to brew inside her. Aiden sat beside her, his bag resting on his lap, his fingers fiddling with the zipper. He wasn't looking at her, and she wasn't looking at him, but both of them were wide awake inside a silence that had weight, texture, and meaning. The air felt thicker than it should have. Every red light lingered longer. Every turn stretched time. When they arrived, Lauren pulled up near the departure's entrance. She kept the engine running, her fingers gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. Aiden looked at her, finally breaking the silence. Thanks for letting me stay. I know it was last minute. She turned to him with a small, forced smile. Of course. Family takes care of family, right? He nodded slowly. There was something in his eyes. Uncertainty, hesitation, maybe even disappointment. He opened the car door, but before stepping out, he paused. Can I ask you something? She hesitated, then nodded. Sure. That moment earlier, in the kitchen, did it mean something to you? Her heart dropped to her stomach. The question she had buried, denied, reasoned away. He had spoken it out loud. She stared at him, trying to find the right words, but there were none. Only the truth that hung between them, sharp and undeniable. I don't know what it meant, she replied softly, but I felt it too. The honesty shocked her more than him. It was like saying it made it more real, more dangerous. Aiden looked at her for a long moment. His expression wasn't smug or flirty. It was raw. I didn't mean for it to happen. I wasn't trying to make anything weird. You didn't, she whispered. I did. I should have drawn a line, but you didn't want to, he finished for her gently. Lauren looked away, ashamed and confused. You should go. Aiden stepped out, but then, as if pulled by something stronger than reason, he leaned down again. I don't expect anything, Lauren. I know this, whatever it is, it can't be anything. She met his gaze, eyes glassy. I know. He looked at her like he was trying to memorize her face. And then he shut the door. As she watched him disappear into the crowd of travelers, Lauren exhaled for the first time in minutes. The space beside her felt colder now. Her skin tingled with everything she hadn't done, everything she didn't say. She drove home in silence, the sound of the windshield wipers her only companion. The moment had passed, but the echo of it remained. It was the kind of moment that didn't end when the door closed or when the car pulled away. It was the kind of moment that marked the beginning of something, even if that something could never be. The house felt different when Lauren returned. It wasn't that anything had changed. The throw pillows were still slightly crooked on the couch. The empty coffee mugs were still in the sink. The faint smell of lavender from yesterday's candle still lingered in the air. But something within her had shifted. The silence no longer felt peaceful, felt haunted. She sat on the edge of the couch and stared at the spot where Aiden had been sitting just hours earlier. The image of his eyes, searching, honest, full of questions she couldn't answer, flashed again in her mind. Her chest tightened. She ran her fingers through her hair, her heart heavier than it should have been for someone who was technically just family. She told herself nothing really happened. No lines had been crossed, at least not physically. But emotions had no respect for the rules. And what had stirred between them couldn't be erased just because it made her uncomfortable. The next few days passed in a blur. Dylan returned from his trip, exhausted and distant. They shared routine conversations, exchanged routine kisses, and moved through the house like polite strangers. Lauren noticed how little effort they made anymore to really see each other. It wasn't new, but it felt more obvious now. She tried to distract herself with work, errands, laundry, but Aiden's voice kept replaying in her head. Did it mean something to you? And her own answer, too soft to be ignored. I felt it too. Every now and then, she would catch herself checking her phone. Not for messages from friends, not for client emails, but out of some silent hope that Aiden might reach out. He didn't. And in that silence, she began to wonder if the moment had meant more to her than to him. On the fourth day, a letter arrived. Not an email, not a text, but an actual, handwritten letter in a plain white envelope with no return address. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Lauren, I didn't know whether I should say anything. I told myself it was better to forget, but I can't. That night meant something to me. Maybe I was just reading into things. Maybe I was stupid to think you saw me, not just as some kid passing through, but as a person who actually mattered for a moment. I don't expect anything. I don't want to cause problems. I just needed you to know. I'll never forget how you made me feel. Safe, seen, and for once not invisible. Aiden Lauren sat frozen for several minutes. The paper shook in her hands. Her breath came in shallow waves. She folded the letter carefully and tucked it into the drawer of her nightstand, under an old scarf she never wore. She didn't know what she was supposed to feel: relief, guilt, longing, maybe all of it at once. Because Aiden had spoken the truth she didn't dare say out loud. She hadn't felt seen in years. Not until that night. The letter stayed hidden in Lauren's nightstand drawer, folded neatly beneath layers of scarves and silence. But even tucked away, it carried weight, pressing against her chest like a secret too heavy to ignore. Every night, after her husband fell asleep, she would reach into the drawer, unfold the paper carefully, and read Aiden's words again. You made me feel seen. They echoed in her mind, not because they were poetic or dramatic, but because they were honest, simple, raw. A truth no one else had said to her in years. Dylan never said things like that. Their conversations now felt like polite exchanges between roommates who forgot how to love each other. The space between them in bed had grown wider, the warmth they once shared now replaced by routine and quiet avoidance. Lauren didn't respond to Aiden. She couldn't. She told herself it would be inappropriate, risky, even selfish. He was 19. He was family or close enough. A response could open a door that had already cracked too far. And yet, not writing back didn't make the feelings go away. One afternoon, while folding laundry, she found a t-shirt Aiden had worn. One of Dylan's older ones that somehow hadn't made it back to the closet. She held it for a moment longer than necessary. It still carried the faintest trace of Aiden's scent. Clean, subtle, and maddeningly nostalgic. She pressed it to her face and instantly hated herself for it. She spent hours analyzing every detail of that night. Had she misread it? Had she allowed a moment of vulnerability to cloud her judgment? Maybe Aiden had just been confused, young, impressionable. But the letter proved otherwise. He remembered. He felt it. And so did she. The hardest part wasn't the guilt. It was the longing. Not for something physical, but emotional. She longed to feel desired, understood, noticed. Aiden, in his brief visit, had stirred something she thought was long gone. A version of herself she had buried under years of marriage, responsibility, and quiet compromises. A week later, Dylan surprised her with dinner reservations. An effort to reconnect, perhaps. They ate at a restaurant downtown, made small talk, and pretended not to feel the cracks in their foundation. He smiled across the table, but his eyes didn't search her face the way Aiden's had. His words were affectionate, but they didn't reach her. She went through the motions, nodded, laughed at the right moments, smiled on cue. But inside, her thoughts were somewhere else. Somewhere in a rainy kitchen at midnight. Somewhere in the way two hands had brushed for a second too long. That night, after Dylan fell asleep, Lauren opened the drawer again. She didn't read the letter this time. She simply held it in her hands, as if touching it could help her understand who she was becoming. She wasn't in love. She wasn't planning to do anything reckless. But something had awakened in her, and no matter how deeply she buried it, it was alive. Time passed as it always does. The leaves turned orange, then brown. Holidays came and went. Lauren hosted a small Thanksgiving dinner, lit candles in December, and rang in the new year with Dylan watching fireworks on TV. Outwardly, everything was normal. The routines returned. The smiles, the errands, the dinner plans, the morning coffees. They all settled back into place like nothing had ever stirred beneath the surface. But Lauren knew better. Something had shifted in her. It was quiet, internal, almost invisible. Yet it was constant, like a faint hum just under her skin. She had changed, and there was no going back to who she had been before Aiden stepped through her door that rainy night. She never spoke of the letter again. It remained in the nightstand, unopened now, as if revisiting it too often might keep the wound fresh. She didn't dare throw it away either. Destroying it felt like erasing something real, something human. Instead, she let it stay buried but close. A silent symbol of a version of herself she wasn't ready to face in full daylight. Dylan never suspected anything. He remained his usual self, distant, but reliable. He was the kind of man who showed love in bills paid on time and a car that always had gas, but not in kisses that lingered or questions that dug deeper. And Lauren had stopped expecting anything more from him years ago. Sometimes, in the middle of dinner or while folding laundry, she'd wonder what Aiden was doing. Was he still in school? Had he moved on? Did he regret the letter? Had he written it late at night, with trembling hands and a heart full of confusion? Or had he meant every word with a clarity that only the young and brave seemed to possess? She considered writing back, just once. Just to thank him for being honest. Just to tell him he didn't imagine it, and neither did she. But she never did. Some stories weren't meant to be continued. Some were meant to stay in the space between memory and longing. Lauren moved through life with grace, but her heart carried a scar, one no one could see. It wasn't from betrayal or heartbreak or loss. It was from a single night that asked her to see herself differently. And once she did, she couldn't unsee it. She wasn't the woman she used to be. Not the loyal wife blindly going through motions. Not the invisible figure in the background of her own life. She was someone who had once been looked at with startling clarity by someone who didn't have to, but did. And though nothing happened, everything changed. She still looked at the door sometimes, wondering if Aiden ever thought of that night, if he ever wondered about her. But she no longer ached the way she used to. She had learned that even brief, forbidden moments could leave lasting marks. And though life moved forward, it never moved untouched. Let me know if you'd like